Welcome to episode 4 of Successful Demo. In each episode, we will analyze the theoretical and practical aspects of one or more newly released cards. Today's card of the day is Open Forum from the latest data pack, Free Mars. This is an interesting card, and on first glance, I think most of you will see that this is an enabler for cards that rely on knowing the top card of R&D. So cards like ABT and Mutate will have some synergy with Open Forum. However, I'd like today to explore a less obvious use for Open Forum, and one which is arguably contentious. I'm going to use Open Forum as a pseudo Sensi Actors Union. So putting these cards side by side, we can see the differences. Obviously, besides the color, Sensi Actors Union is cheaper to res, draws you 3 cards instead of 1 card, allows you to literally bury the one card from your hand instead of putting it on the top of R&D. This is actually quite a big difference because this means that with Sensi Actors Union, you can literally bury unwanted agendas, whereas you can't do that with Open Forum. You put it on top of R&D, the runner runs R&D, they'll get your agenda. Finally, Open Forum actually reviews the card you draw, giving the runner free information, something that is almost always detrimental to the core. Looking at this, I think it's pretty obvious that Open Forum is basically a lousy version of Sensi Actors Union. I guess one redeeming factor is that it does have a higher trash cost of 3 instead of 2, which could be relevant, but otherwise, you would almost always rather have Sensi. That being said, in the standard format, we do know that Sensi Actors Union is on the most wanted list, tier 3 in fact. Therefore, Open Forum is a nice substitute if you can't afford the influence. So, if you want to use Open Forum, like a Sensi Actors Union, you do actually need to pair this with a shuffle effect, so a card that allows you to shuffle your deck every single turn. Otherwise, on your next turn after using Open Forum, you simply mandatorily draw the card that you just put on top of R&D, giving you no progress, doing not much to you. You are not actually Open Forum is not being productive at all if your mandatory draw is drawing the card you just top decked instead. So you do actually need an effect such as Museum of History to shuffle the card you put on top of R&D. That way, you'll be basically seeing 2 fresh cards each turn instead of 1, and you'll have the ability to shuffle away one unwanted card from your hand. This could be useful because in decks that you want to use Open Forum in, chances are you have a bunch of tech cards which may or may not be useful for that matchup. So being able to top deck your tech cards and then shuffle them away is a nice way of getting rid of them. It also should be noted that unlike Sensi Actors Union, you cannot stack Open Forum with itself. Additional copies of Open Forum will simply review the card that you just put back on top of R&D. So you draw the same card that you just put back on R&D, leaving you not much further ahead. Finally, this is one influence. It's important to note because if you're looking to splash it out of faction, it's not expensive. However, given that it's so bad at what it does, you probably don't want to be splashing this as a Sensi replacement. Daily Business Show is probably even better in that regard because you actually can bury cards with DBS. So the only way I see you splashing Open Forum out of faction is if you are doing combos with top deck cards like ABT or Mutate. Otherwise, if you want to use this as a Sensi Actors Union replacement, you are staying in faction. So something like a Wayland Acid Spam deck, which is what I'm going to play today. Sorry folks. This is what it came to. They printed this card, they're making me play Acid Spam, I guess I will. The good news is, however, we are going to play it in Scorp Corp, not Gagarin as you might expect. I think Scorp Corp is a very important Acid Spam ID to consider. Because it sounds really weird, I know, but money isn't everything, and sometimes you really do need the exile power of Scorpios to deal with some of the runner side cards and make life really, really difficult for the runner at times. So this deck is basically one that kills with Zealous Judge into Boom. That's the main win condition, and it does so passively. It waits until the runner trips up on a bad run on a snare or a KP Lin, and then proceeds to kill them with tags from Zealous Judge, and then boom. It's a simple combo that really needs a lot of strong draw and economy engine pieces to get going. Therefore, I'm going to test Open Forum in this deck to see how much work it does. Join me at the table as we get down to the game. First game, what do you know? Maximum Punk Rock. This is a very ideal matchup for Scorpios. Every turn they mill 2 cards from the deck, involuntarily. Guess what? Scorpius is gonna snipe your stuff before you can even get to it. This should be interesting. So I keep my opening in hand here. I would rather see some economy assets early. However, having ice early could be useful. Not to mention that arc lockdown can really punish my opponent if they are overconfident in ditching their stuff. Take note that I do not actually know that my opponent's on DLR max just yet. Right now I'm just playing in the dark, so I'm doing some pretty safe opening of double ice. I mean ice and asset. So I'm looking for the mills to see what kind of deck my opponent is on. This is something you always want to do against Max, and doubly so if you're Scorpios, because this means that you can potentially snipe a useful card from the bin. But all my opponent shows is double gamble, so no information leak at all. Daily cast goes down. I'm thinking, okay, this is not Siphon Max. It should be good. So I don't really need to fortify HQ or anything. I'm gonna keep drawing for cards. As asset spam, you want to draw lots of cards. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any of my card draw mechanisms yet, but I do find a commercial bankers group, so this is gonna help me accelerate my early game. I'm gonna click for a credit and pass the turn over, where I see Account Siphon and Joshua B. Well, that's a no-brainer. No questions right there. Siphon goes straight into the exile pool. Don't want to have that hitting HQ. Now my opponent responds very nicely with Scrubber. Scrubber is a very important card in DLR Max. It allows you to keep the assets down so that your siphons are maximum effect. And yeah, losing my commercial bankers group just like that hurts quite a bit. This is where I really wish I was Gagarin instead of Scorpios. But hey, can't really complain when I've just removed a siphon from the game. I also see DLR hitting the table, so I know that my time is limited. I need to be really concerned, even though this is a 54 card deck, so it takes a while to mill out. Even though I have Museum of History to stem the milling a bit, I do know that I am pretty much on the timer. So I keep drawing for cards. Hopefully I can find more stuff that I can jam into my servers. So a second commercial bankers group hits the table, as well as a zealous judge. This should help me set up my kill combo, assuming my opponent doesn't protect against the kill. Given that they need to be tagged to get DLR to work, hopefully I can get my win con going easier than most other runners. So I find more money, which is good. Commercial bankers group gets a tick, and then I find a pair campaign, so that's all good. But my opponent actually gets a Wireless Net Pavilion down. I do know that Wireless Net Pavilion is a location, so I'm gonna use Elizabeth Mills from my hand to trash the WNP before my opponent starts tagging themselves. This is a little questionable, especially given that my opponent has a fall guy, but the theory is here that if I can get rid of the fall guy on my turn, I can then safely exile it with Scorpios, so that's one less fall guy I have to worry about. So the way I see this game is as such: if I can get rid of the DLRs, I basically win the game. If I can make enough money, that is. That's a pretty hard goal to achieve. The secondary win condition of killing my opponent could work as well, but so far they're not taking tags. If anything, they might not even take tags, because both siphons are now exiled. So given the standard DLR max influence, you know that they only run 2 account siphons, so I don't actually have to worry about account siphon for the rest of the game. In the meantime, my opponent actually finds that, yeah, another fall guy, so this is going to be a bit tricky to handle. And they also found an employee strike to compound matters. So this is where I really need to start digging deep and calculating my opponent's influence spread. Knowing the DLR deck, max deck, card for card actually really helps me in this regard. I knew for a fact that they only had 1 employee strike, because the rest of the influence had to be spent on fall guys and levies, as well as account siphon. So with that, I could actually safely make the play of play paywall implementation, followed by arc lockdown employee strike. This gets rid of the employee strike, and yeah, I don't have to worry about my ID ability being turned off for the rest of the game. This is the one reason why I actually included arc lockdown in my corp deck. Employee strike actually hurts my ID ability a lot, and it allows certain runners to get back in the game when they shouldn't be. You should be able to suppress a lot of runners who rely on cards like Levy AR Live Access and Recursion from the bin. So if they ever play strike against you, Arc Lockdown is the way to go, and I've successfully done the combo, allowing me to get my Scorpio's ability off for the rest of the game, and just in time too, because I did manage to snipe a paperclip from the max mill, so my opponent has no access to barrier breakers. This is actually quite important. Now I continue my tirade of endless assets now that I don't have to worry about employee strike. However, My opponent still has an out. Even though this game looks really bad for my opponent, they still have their win condition, their main win condition up and going, which is the mill. DLR is not a card to be trifled with. They can easily win the game off some lucky mills. So I definitely do not have the money to contest my opponent's milling engine. So, especially not after hitting that snare. They hit the snare, and I get to hit 3 cards from the hand. I get to remove 1 DLR from the game, but that's not much. Bringing me down to 2 credits is actually pretty dangerous. Yeah, you don't want to be there. So now I res my open forum. This is not yet implemented on Jinteki.net, so I'll have to do this manually. So the way we do this manually is we add a click manually and then draw a card. I'll tell my opponent what card I just drew, and then I'll put something on top of my deck. So that's how it works. This will happen for the rest of the game. So right now what I'm looking for is my boom. The server 3, the unrest asset there is Zealous Judge. So if I have 6 credits, I can res Zealous Judge, give my opponent an extra tag to complement the 1 tag they have from snare, and then boom them for the win. That is my win con, so all I need to do is to dig for the boom right now. I know I can't win by trashing my opponent's resources because it's too expensive. To chew through the Fall Guy and the Wildest Net Pavilion, I'll need minimum 8 credits, maybe even more, and I just cannot support that economy when my opponent has a scrubber on the table. They are just going to scrub away all my pet campaigns and commercial backers group, which my opponent is very diligently doing this game. As you see, I have no money assets on the table except for Indian Union Stock Exchange, which isn't doing much work itself because I haven't found many other cards to spam. So it's not looking good for me in terms of winning against the mill engine. However, winning with boom should be relatively easy provided I can actually find the boom. Yeah, that's easier said than done. So here, open forum triggers, I review a Zealous Judge, and I put it back on R&D. Usually, you put the agenda on top of R&D, but I can't do it here because it will be susceptible to milling and running R&D. You don't want the graft in my hand to go back into archives, so yeah. I do actually find the tour guide here. This is going to be a very important card. I decide that I need to construct the remote ASAP so that I can get some money going. I desperately need economy at this point, so I'm going to get tech startup and tour guide into server 10. This way, my opponent cannot trash the tech startup, and I will be able to get an asset of my choice at the start of my turn. This is very flexible. It could be a total bags. That's what I'm thinking right now, but it could be any other asset as well. It could be an Elizabeth Mills to get rid of the bad pub and to trash the wireless net. It could be a Museum of History to give me more recursion. And to put my agenda spank to R&D instead of having my opponent mill them. There are so many things tech startup could be. It's very, very good in asset spam decks because it gives you so much flexibility. My opponent plays Blue Moose. Jeez, okay, my opponent's going to be rich. Will it matter? I'm not so sure. I've already removed their MK Ultra from the game as well, so with both their Sentry and the Barrier Breaker of the game, I'm feeling rather safe right now in terms of hiding behind my ice. So their money doesn't really matter. What matters is the milling. I cannot lose to mill. So as I mentioned earlier, I did go for the turtle bags in the end, and I'm going to start spamming out. But I'm kind of worried that rezzing the turtle bags here will snipe the pack campaign from my hand. I want to install the pack campaign, but if it's sniped by Hacktivist meeting, I can't do that. So yeah, my opponent playing Hacktivist is a really good play. It denies my paywall, but more importantly, it makes asset spam really, really difficult to accomplish. So I did have to trash a Museum of History there to Hacktivist meeting in order to res the total bags so I could get my total bags credits off of installing a new asset, the pack campaign. My opponent milled their last few cards from the deck, and what do you know? There was a levy. They did not actually manage to find the levy on their first pass, so I managed to exile it. This is probably one of the worst possible DLR max draws against Scorpios. Both siphons were exiled, 2 of the 3 breakers were exiled, as well as the levy. Very, very unlucky for my opponent. I do feel very sorry for them for that. So as DLR max, actually, what you want to do against Scorpios is to mull for your 1 employee strike. If you can get employee strike down turn 1, you'll be able to safely proceed with the next few turns without worrying about Scorpios interfering with your mill ability. Unfortunately for my opponent, they did mull, but they didn't find the employee strike, so awful luck for them. But yeah, not much you can do about that. However, the game's not over. My opponent's still not in concede territory because the mill is still well and truly alive. They're going to run archives here, and they're going to get the graph that I believe was trashed from Hacktivist meeting. So yeah, There are two agendas away from winning. One, if they find my government takeover. This is actually rather scary. I don't really have a way to protect archives just yet. Well, I do actually. The tour guide in hand. So I think I can seal archives here. All I need to do is drop the tour guide on archives and I'm good. With MK Ultra exiled from the game, they can't get through archives that way. So I'm gonna review a tech startup here with Open Forum, and I'm gonna put that tech startup back on R&D. It's not gonna be of much use. What I want is the commercial bankers group. So yeah, this is a big problem. While I am gonna stem the mill with, or rather, I'm not even stemming the mill. While I'm gonna prevent my opponent from running archives with tour guide on archives. The problem is I've spent my cards, or with asset spam, you are throwing out lots of cards on the table. I can't actually res my commercial bankers group here because it is an additional cost to res, to trash a card to Hacktivist meeting in order to res the CBG. So because of this, I was forced to basically draw lots of cards for this turn so that I can res the commercial bankers group next turn. Drawing cards is good as well, because right now my win condition is definitely boom. Given that my opponent has 2 Fall Guys, Wireless Net, and 2 DLRs, I think it's pretty clear that I'm not going to be able to trash my opponent's resource rig this game. No All-Seeing Eye, no Freelancer. So I have to go for the boom win condition. At this point, I'm looking at my opponent's bin and I see the Jargonu mercenaries, I don't know which, but probably mercenaries. Either way, it's not something I want to see. Thankfully, there's one in the bin. I hope they're only running 1 copy of it, because if they actually play a Jargonu Mercs from their hand, it's going to be really hard to boom them. Speaking of boom, I played 2 copies of it. I haven't found it. I'm 2/3 of my way through my deck. This is ridiculous. So I'm going to find it with Jackson Howard. Going to drop the Jackson there, res it, pay the Hacktivist price, double draw. Where is my boom? I need it. It's not there. This is bad. But I'm looking at my bin. There's a bunch of agendas in there. Okay, I can't dish an agenda here because there's like, what, 12 agenda points in there? Yeah, that's more than enough for my opponent to win. Actually, 15 points. All my agendas are in the bin. So that's actually quite scary. The good news is I know that this deck doesn't really run more breakers than just one of each of the conspiracy breakers. So with MK Ultra, MK Ultra out of the picture, I should have archives as the most secure server. As long as they don't trash all my assets, tour guide will basically hard end the run on archives. So I'm going to continue looking for my boom here. I should be drawing with Jackson, not this is open forum draw. So open forum gives you the extra reach, but it still wasn't enough. Even though I saw 2 cards, one with mandatory draw and one with open forum, I can't find my boom. That's bad. Yeah. What can I do? So I'm going to create a new remote with an end to run ice there, and then drop my Museum of History behind that piece of ice. Museum of History is going to be the card that saves me this game, as Jargonu Mercs hits the table. With Museum of History out and res, my opponent has no way of winning by mill, because at the start of my turn, before my mandatory draw takes place, I get to put my card back to R&D. This way I will never mill myself. I have to be careful about open forum is fine, because open forum doesn't force you to draw cards. It says add the top card to R&D. So adding is not drawing. You don't lose if open forum triggers. This is an interesting point to note. Still, at this point I realized that I couldn't lose the game on archives or by mill, because archives is secure, my opponent can't get in, and Museum of History prevents me from decking out. So I only have to worry about my opponent getting agendas from centrals. But with most of my agendas in archives, I think I'm safe from that. So all I need to do here is to top deck my boom. I already found 1 boom last turn. I boomed the Jargonu Mercs to Oblivion. And all I need to do is find 1 more boom to win the game. My opponent attempts to run the Museum of History here, knowing that that's their win con. Or rather, that's the way they lose. It denies them their milling win con. And they fail to do so because tour guide. They are starting to realize that this game is almost impossible to win. Snooping around the important servers, they realize they're protected by ice, which they do not have the correct breakers for. And this goes to show you the power of Scorpios in achieving a total lockout as opposed to Gagarin, where the runner still has a small chance of victory. All I need to do is to keep putting boom on the top of my deck, and I should be able to eventually find it and win. It's a very interesting matchup, two very degenerate decks. I had to play a very weird way in order to win against the Max. You don't usually play like this. Usually HQ and R&D are the most important servers locked down, but in this matchup it ends up being Archives and your Museum of History remote. So I managed to identify that win con before my opponent identified their win con, and that's how I managed to eventually win the game by top decking my Boom. It took me forever to top deck the winning Boom, however. Throughout the mid to late game, I had a lot of opportunities where top deck Boom would have allowed me to res Zealous Judge and give an extra tag to win with 2 tags and Boom. But that wasn't the case, and we just cast all eyes on Open Forum for that. Did it help me draw my Boom? Not quite. Why? It's not so much because Open Forum is a sucky card, well it is, but it was more because I couldn't sustain my Museum of Histories. My opponent was ignoring my Open Forum because they knew that without Museum of History, Open Forum was basically not going to help me dig more quickly through my deck. And that was the big problem. It was basically a 2-card combo that's required for even a semi-decent draw engine. And without both cards present on the board, you don't really have a powerful draw engine. This is why it took me ages to find a Boom. So long that my opponent had the time to install a 7 power counter Jarogneil Mercs. Yeah. So yeah, the only reason I actually managed to win in the end was actually because my opponent milled a lot of cards from my deck. That way, they helped me thin my deck and allowed me to top deck the Boom using Museum of History with a higher probability. That was the only reason this game actually finished this quickly. If my opponent wasn't milling me with DLR, it would have taken even longer. They might have even won on Centrals, who knew? Anyway, I also should note that Open Forum doesn't fill your hand with extra cards, which is actually quite important. What I mean is that it doesn't draw you cards clicklessly, unlike Estelle Moon and Sensi Actors Union. This is why both of those aforementioned cards are very powerful in asset spam decks, because as asset spam, you want lots of cards in your hand to spam on the table and to use as fodder against Hacktivist Meeting. Speaking of Hacktivist, that was very oppressive. I wasn't able to get as many assets going as I would have liked because Hacktivist was constantly forcing me to trash cards from my hand that I would have otherwise installed. Of course, asset spam deserves this badly, and yeah, I deserve it, but it should be noted that if you want to counter asset spam, Wayland asset spam decks like this, Hacktivist is a very strong counter. Finally, Open Forum is very awkward because it has the review effect. While we did not see it this game, I think all my reviews were non-agendas. I kept revealing assets and ice, but what if it revealed the government takeover? That would be such an awkward situation. Do I top deck it on R&D? They would just hammer R&D and HQ. And knowing that it was Colossus on R&D and Morcelus on HQ, they could have easily gotten it for the win. That would have been a super awkward position to be in, don't you agree? Thankfully, that didn't happen. My opponent milled the government takeover with DLR instead, so I didn't have to deal with that. But yeah, it was so awkward. Or rather, it could have been. So that's something very important to note. It's actually a very huge downside of Open Forum, and this is another strike on it in terms of using it as a Sensi replacement in Wayland Asset Spam. Another card I want to look at is actually